All right, it is 11:08 a.m. Welcome to Advanced Kentucky's week 4 of online content review sessions for AP Computer Science A. My name is Aaron Timmons. I'm the Mathematics Content Director, joined by our STEM coordinator, Dr. Sherry McGuffin, and today's presenter, Dr. Joe Hoffert from Indiana Wesleyan University. We're going to talk fast and get right into things. So let me go over a few housekeeping items. Contact information, Facebook, Twitter. Feel free to reach out to us after today's session if you have any follow-up questions. Microphones will stay off, videos will stay off. Use the chat feature. Joe's got a couple polls prepared, but any questions you have, regardless if you're a student or a teacher, feel free to put those in the chat. Sherry and I will be monitoring and get those questions to Joe right away. kyap2020.com is your place to go for all previous recordings for these review sessions, as well as additional resources. So please check that out. There's also information for our mock exam that is currently going on. We're going to skip the sign-in just in the interest of time. Most of you, I recognize your names from previous weeks, so we're glad you can be back. We're going to go ahead. Oh, I went too far. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then turn things over to Joe. Can give us a quick introduction of himself again, and then Joe, it's all you.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. So hi, everybody. Sorry for the delay, technical difficulties, as we like to say. My name is Joe Hoffert. I teach computer science at Indiana Wesleyan University, oddly enough, in the state of Indiana. And I've been involved with NIMC and AP College Board stuff for, 5-6 years. Started out with A, doing some reading, grading for A, and then switched to principals when that came online, and been a reader, table leader, all that kind of stuff. So that's some of my background. I also have background in a couple decades in industry and things like that related to computer science. Thanks for joining us today. So today's session is more general review as opposed to any one particular topic, as we're getting close to the AP exam. So I wanted to start off, let's see, let me bring up sheets here. Okay, so can everybody see the student handout?
Yeah, it looks good on our side.
Okay, good. So I just wanted to start off here addressing some of these questions in different areas. So the exam deals with, in general, these 4 different areas for free response question types. Right? So one is methods and control structures. One is object-oriented programming, developing a class. One is array list, and one is 2-dimensional arrays. And so there have been modules, separate modules for each one of these topics. So again, this session is more a review and focusing on these areas. So in that regard, I wanted to just bring up some quiz questions related to those and see if these are familiar.
And Joe, we can't see that black box, so I think you might need to make sure you're sharing your whole desktop and not just the document.
Yeah, I was going to switch, but yeah, I'll do the whole.
All right, gotcha.
Okay, can you see the whole thing now?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, all right. So this first question, again, this is a bit of review and just to see where we are. This deals with methods and tracing. And so it just asks, consider the following code segment, and then what will be printed at the end of it. So take a few seconds, look at that, and then I think Aaron has a poll question for A, B, C, D, or E.
That poll is up, completely anonymous, so feel free to put any kind of, no fear there. All right, Joe, looks like we've got 3 out of 4 people responding. So do you want to go ahead and end it?
Okay, yep, that sounds good.
All right, there are the results.
Okay. Yeah, so the answer here is A. And I have to admit, when I was reviewing this and looking at this recently, I made some assumptions, probably because I was thinking some hubris on my part and things like that. But looking through this, so when I first looked at this code, I was thinking, oh, okay, I understand what's going on here. They're looking for all the O's and the indexes, the indices for all the O's in this string. And of course, I know that Java is 0-based and not 1-based. So the very first occurrence, right, is going to be this O and H, O and how. And so that's going to be index 1, right, because H is 0, right? So, okay, what are my choices that start with 1? It's A and C. Oh, okay, and if I go through, see, here's index 1, here's index 5, here's index 8, here's index 12. So C must be the answer. But it's not the right answer because of what's going on right here. The string is being modified each time. And so that's, I kind of rushed through this, I made assumptions, and I got the wrong answer. If the code was modifying the index and we were doing, just searching in the index of, if we were giving it, updating the index and telling it to start at a certain position and the string wasn't being modified, then C would have been the right answer. So I think this is a really good example of how tracing can help. So this is, we've had some experience with that in other modules. So writing down some of the variables and how they get modified as we iterate through the code, right? So an important one turns out to be this string S, right? And seeing, oh, that string gets modified. And so as I trace through the code with each iteration, this string gets chopped down to be smaller and smaller. Any questions about this example? Okay. I don't see any. Are we having any, Aaron?
I'm not getting any.
Okay. So again, this is a review kind of thing. And it's important to do some tracing, write down variables, and see how things get modified as you iterate through the code. Okay. Let's see. So I've got another one here. Bring this up. See if I can. I think I can probably get it in here. Need to make it smaller. Okay, so this is some code. I'll make it even smaller. Hopefully everybody can still read that okay. And this isn't a poll question because it was a little bit harder to set that up. But there are some questions at the end that we'll talk about. But take some time and look at this class. So this is a review for classes, and students can be asked to design and implement a described class. So this review hopefully is helpful just to be sure we're grounded as far as what a class is and different attributes of a class and what to look for, that kind of thing. So take a look at this class code, and then I'll ask some of these questions, and there's no way to respond. I guess you could send a chat if you want to, but we'll just talk about talk about the answers to these questions. Okay, so maybe it'd be helpful just to guide the discussion to look at these questions. So how many private instance variables are there in the class? And so the answer is 3, right? We have these 3 up here. Okay, so those are the private instance variables for this class, the candy bar class. And as always, feel free to send a chat message if something's not clear. If you think I don't have the wrong answer, if you think I have the wrong answer, that kind of thing, which can certainly happen. Feel free to chat, send a message. Okay, so how many constructors are there in the class? And so that we need to know what a constructor is and how we would identify that. So in here, right, we have 2 constructors. Okay, these 2, and this gets to question 5 as well. How do we know what a constructor is? Well, it's the same name as the class, right? Candy bar, and it has no return type at all. So that's what tips us off that, oh yeah, this is a constructor. These 2 are the methods that get used, that get called whenever a candy bar object is created, one or the other, right? These are the only 2 ways to create any kind of candy bar object. Okay, so how many accessor methods are there in the class? And the answer is there are 2 of them. And the question can come up, well, what's an accessor method? Maybe you might have heard the term a getter method. Getter or accessor. It just returns some information from the object. Right? It doesn't change anything. It's just returning some information. So here we're just returning the price. We're not changing the object at all. We're just sending back information that object has. Same kind of thing with the get name. So the next question, question 4, how many mutator methods are there in the class? And there are 2, okay, these 2 here. Mutator or setter methods. Sometimes you might hear getter and setter, right? Accessor and mutator. So this is where the object gets changed, right? So that's where the object gets mutated, where something gets set in the object. So that's why we use those terms, right? So a new price is coming in, so we're going to update this price data member. The make king method, we're going to update this king size to set it to true. I'm wondering in my own mind, there are some things we could do to make this code maybe a little more robust. So I said, we're going to modify king size to true. Maybe it's true already. This could be called multiple times, right? And if we wanted to make this more robust, we could do some kind of checking and all that kind of stuff. But taking it for what it is, it's going to set king size to true. It's going to add 0.5 to the price, right? If we want to assume dollars, then 50 cents, right, adds to the price. So it's changing the price, possibly changing king size, certainly setting it to true, and then returning the price. So things are getting changed here in this method, make king, and things are getting changed here in change price. So those are the mutator methods. So we talked about 5 already, what distinguishes a constructor. So let's look at 6 and think about all the different return types that are showing up in the candy bar class. So take a second or two, look through here, and see if you can come up with all the different return types. Okay, so if we look at the different methods, we have these constructors, right? But we said one thing about a constructor, they don't have any return type, right? There's nothing there. So now we look here, and the return type of get price is double. So double is one return type. Then we have get name, and it returns a string. So far we have double and we have string. And then here for change price, we have void, right? So the question is, what kind of return type is that? So I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. Essentially what that means is nothing's getting returned, right? This is just a way to signal there is no return type. Void is not a return type, right? It's just signaling nothing gets returned. Okay. So all the different return types we have include double and string in this example. Okay. And then what is the default price of a candy bar object? And so if we look at this candy bar constructor that takes no arguments, we can think of that as the default constructor, right? Takes no arguments. The price is set to 0.99. And again, we can think 99 cents. If we're in Europe, maybe it's 0.99 euros or something like that. All right, so any questions about the candy bar class? The questions we went over, questions about classes in general?
No questions on this one.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, then let's go to the next question. And I think Aaron has a whole setup for this. So for Java, an array list differs from an array in that elements can be added or removed. All elements must be of the same type. It can contain both object references and primitive types. The data type is determined in the declaration. Okay, it looks like, yeah, looks like we have all our votes there. Okay, so it seems like people are fairly comfortable, familiar with ArrayList. We actually talked about this last week. So this was one of the, if you were with us last week, this is one of the same poll questions. So with an array list, we can actually add or remove elements. Can't do that with an array. All elements must be of the same type. That's true for ArrayList and array, both of them. It can contain both object references and primitive types. That's only true of array. And the data type is determined in the declaration. That's true for both of them as well, ArrayList and array. Okay, good. let's go on to our fourth review question. Think of it that way. All right, some more code to look at. So here's a code segment. Take a few minutes, look through it, understand what's going on, and then the question is what's printed as a result of executing the code segment. So essentially, what gets printed out here.
All right, I think you're good there on responses.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so the answer we're going for is 7. So nicely done, right? We've got these values here, and we're essentially building up a 3x3 array. How are we doing it? We're sort of coming at it from the back end, right? We're going to length -1. The length is 9, but again, we're 0-based index, so we want to start at position or index 8, which would be right here. Okay, and so 987. We put into, right, we start at 0, 0, and the column gets incremented each time. And then what's going on here, we're essentially just shifting to the next row. So new array.length, right? This is always going to be 3 in this case, right? So if column is equal to 3, and we've already done the assignment into it, then we're going on to the next row, essentially. Okay. So then at the end of all this code, we have a 3x3 array where the first row is 987, second row is 654, and the third row is 321. So if we want to know at the first row, the third column, again, because we're 0-based, then that's going to be the value 7, because we have 987 on that first row. Okay, good. All right, so those are the questions I had as part of review. And as always, feel free to jump in if you have other questions about what we've covered. Okay, let me bring this down here a little bit. Whoop. Okay. Just some things to highlight as we go through here. Right, so pay attention to the various classes that are provided. In general, the College Board is not trying to trick anybody by putting extraneous or information in there that's not needed. That's just going to be confusing. The information that's there is put there because you're going to need it, and you'll be able to use it. Often there'll be, if you're creating a class or creating a method, there might be other methods. For example, let's see, you can even jump ahead a little bit here. Right, there's this private class reservation, and you'll get a comment like this: private data and other methods not shown. So that's a signal that there's other stuff there, maybe, but it doesn't matter for this particular question. So don't get bogged down in, oh, I wonder what those other private data members are. I wonder what the other methods are. For the question at hand, you don't need to know about those. So that's always good to remember. And then talking about paying attention to preconditions and postconditions, they can really be quite helpful. Let's take a look at some examples there. They might be a little hard to pick out because they're not, the word precondition and postcondition, those words aren't in there. But things like the parameters that are listed, right? So here we have this method request room, and we can look at that later if we have enough time. But the parameter that's being passed in here, right, is the name of a guest requesting a room. And so we can think of that as a precondition. That's what's coming in. That's what's given to us. And then the postcondition often is in the return, the return statement. So given that this guest name comes in, name of a guest requesting a room, with that being the precondition, what is this method gonna do? What is it gonna return? Right, so it's gonna return a reference to the reservation if a room was available and null otherwise. So that even gives you, it's important to pay attention, especially to return values. So some students will even, when they're writing out a method, they'll look to see if they need to return anything. If they do, they'll put it right at the bottom, maybe with a blank or something like that, and then fill it in later what in particular they need to return. But always pay attention to that as well if there's something that needs to be returned. It could be the case you don't need to do that. For example, we saw some of those mutator methods, and then there wasn't anything that needed to be returned there, and we could return something, but we might also be changing something in the object itself. But I'll always pay attention to what needs to be returned, pay attention to the parameters that are passed in. And I think this is touching on, this third bullet here, right? If you see if, talk a little bit about return. If you see if in the comments, that can help you to understand, oh, what do I need for my algorithm, even in some sense, right? So if we go back to this request room, if there are any empty rooms, well, that's probably a clue, a good signal that, oh, I probably need an if statement in there, because I'll have to check somehow, right? I have to code it up, but somehow I'll have to have if, checking empty rooms kind of thing. Okay? And if that's true, then I need to, create a reservation. Okay? But if this is false, right, here's this otherwise, then I need to stick something on this waitlist data member, right? So this gives you even a good sense, a template, if you will, of what the algorithm should do in this case. So pay attention to the comments that are given that way, right? It won't show you specific code. You have to do that, but it'll give you design helps, design tips for what should go on inside this method. All right. Some other kinds of non-technical reminders, right? Write legibly, that always helps. I have seen before students will put comments in general. That's probably not helpful. You know, I don't want to say, you know, this says don't waste time on comments. I don't know that I would say that necessarily, because you could, with your comments, set up your design and your algorithm. And then you can look at your comments and say, okay, here's the code, here's a Java specific code that's going to address this part of the algorithm. So I don't know if comments are a waste of time. Certainly, though, they are disregarded by the readers, the scorers, right? If we see comments, they mean nothing, right? Just like they mean nothing to the Java compiler. But, you know, I am hesitant to say, you know, don't waste time on comments. You know, if you're mapping out your design, I think that's a great way to go. Way too often I have students that want to just jump in and start coding, and they haven't really thought about what's the solution at a higher level, what's the design, what's the algorithm. You know, abstract away the programming level details if it's too complex, right? And just focus on the algorithm. And then once you have the algorithm, then you can map each section of the algorithm to code. Ultimately, it's the code that gets scored, but comments might be helpful. Indentation always helps, but points aren't taken off if indentation's not adhered to, at least in the AP exam. Now, in my classes, I want students to write well documented and readable code. But for College Board, you know, these submissions, points will not be taken off if you don't indent. But it does help to make it clear what's going on, and if a student accidentally forgets a closing brace or something like that, but if things are indented, you know, that can be helpful, and we can think, oh, okay, we think this was their intent. All right, this is a good point too. So there are examples given typically with free response questions, just sort of showing students, you know, this is how this would work for this set of data. But students sometimes will code up for that particular instance, that particular example, right? It has to work generally and not just for that specific example. Let's see, what else to highlight? So sometimes students will put in print lines. I want to be careful and say you will never be required to do that. I want to be careful, but if you're ever doing a print line, you need to really think long and hard if that's what's being asked. Because in general, you're going to be asked to return something, return a value, right? And not print something out, Okay, so think long and hard if you ever see a print line statement. And in fact, this says extraneous, right? So I'd say don't do it. Okay, let's see. Right, we talked about return values as well. Be careful of null values, right? You can check with the equals, not equals operators. And always use equals when you're comparing objects for quality. If you need more room, right, just write on another page. You can have as many pages as you think you need. If you're writing some code and you don't like it or you realize that this is bad stuff, don't erase, just put a big X over it, right? That'll save you time. And the graders will just ignore it if it has a big X over it and come to the first code that's not crossed out. And we talked a little bit about tracing before with one of our examples. So again, we had that case of off by one error. It could be when we were doing the index of the O's in that string, right? Just realizing, oh yeah, Java is 0 based and not 1 based. All right, let's see here. So we have about 10 minutes or so. So we can move into this next free response example. So here's a reservation class, and at least in this part. There's also a hotel reservation, so hotel class, I should say. So we have reservation, and we have this hotel class as well. And we need to look at both parts of these. Okay. So again, this is for reference, this reservation class. You'll need to be familiar with this class as you use it with the hotel class. But we have a constructor, right? It takes a name and a room number, and then we have a method that returns a room number. There might be other stuff with this, but again, it's not germane, it's not relevant to this free response. So pay attention when you write your solution that, yeah, you should be using as constructor and get room number, right? They're there for a reason, okay? All right, so here's hotel reservation as name and room number passed in, and we can get back the room number. So there's a hotel class below here, and there are hotel reservations numbered for the rooms, numbered 0 up to the last room number. So if there are 100 rooms, again, Java 0 based, so they're trying to make it easy for you, right? Hotels typically don't have room number 0, but just making it easy for the students here. And so if there are 100 rooms, they would be numbered 0 to 99. Okay. And so here's our hotel class, and this is where the student will need to do some work. And so we have this array of reservations, this rooms data member, right? Reservations again are up here. So we have this set of reservations we're calling rooms. We also have this array list of strings for the wait list. Okay. And that'll come into play if there's a request for a room, but there aren't rooms available, right? Then that name goes on this wait list here. All right, so part A, and this is typical with these exams, there are 2 parts. right? There's part A and part B. So the first part is implementing this request room method. And again, we looked at this as an example. What should go on in there? If there are any empty rooms, again, if, right? So we should have an if statement in our method. So if there are any rooms, then create a reservation, right? Create a reservation. So again, we have a constructor for a reservation object. That's probably important. It is important because it shows up here, right? Then create a reservation for an empty room, and return the new reservation. Okay. Otherwise, again, this is linked with this. If there are any rooms, if there aren't any empty rooms, then you add to this wait list here, return null. So let's see. Yeah, let's do this. I don't think we have a good way to share code, but just take a few minutes and think about what that might look like. Okay, let me, in the interest of time, let's take a look at what came up here. Okay. All right, so we're iterating through the rooms, right, to find one that's empty, right, not taken. And if that's the case, right, in this array, again, if we look at the array of reservations that are called rooms. So we want to iterate through these to see if there's an empty one, okay? And if there is, then we're going to create this new reservation. We've got the guest name, and we want the room number, which we can get as we're iterating through. And then that's what we would return. But if we finish this for loop and haven't executed this return, then that means we come down here. It also means we haven't found any empty rooms. So there can be different ways you can set this up, right? Programming in computer science is really very creative. Lots of different ways you can come up with the right solution. This is one way. And so if we get to this point, that means there aren't any empty rooms. And so we're just going to add that name to the wait list and then return null because there's no reservation to be made because all the rooms are full. Okay, any questions about part A? All right, if not, then we'll quickly look through this part B, which is cancel and reassign. So we get a reservation object passed in, and we're going to release that room with that reservation. Okay, and so you might think about how would we do that. So this is a reservation that's in this array of reservations, and so we want to essentially take that out of the array. And again, we've got this, you know, if keyword. So that can help us, again, design our algorithm. If there are any names stored in the wait list, we take that name out of the wait list, right, and create a reservation for it. Because now we know that there's an empty room, right, because we just released one. Okay, and if the wait list is empty, which is essentially saying, so, you know, we canceled a reservation, we have a room available, but nobody's waiting, right? Then mark the room specified by res is empty, right? And again, in that array of reservations, and then just return null. Okay, so we don't have a lot of time to think about this, but and there are a couple of different ways to look at this. Right, so here's, again, one possible solution. So we get the room number. Again, if there's some method that's shown to you in the classes and you never use it, you should really think, why haven't I used that method? Right, so that get room number was shown to us in the reservation class. Okay, so we can get the room number. And if there's nobody in the wait list, nobody's waiting, then we just set that room number, room number to null, right? We just clear that out. But otherwise, in that spot, we'll create a new reservation, getting a name from the wait list. And we also need to remove that name from the wait list. Okay, and we want to get the first ones, first come, first serve. So we get the very first name, right? This wait list is a array list of strings. And so to create a reservation, we need a name and a number. And we get the room number from the cancellation. And then we would return either the null or the reservation object. So that's one way to do it. Here's another way. Again, we get the room number. And we go ahead and set that reservation to null in our array of reservations. If the wait list isn't empty, then we get the name and remove it. Right? And yeah, return room number. Okay, so that'll be the reservation that'll get returned. Okay. All right, and that might be our time, Aaron. Is that right?
Yeah, you did pretty good there. We're right at 11:59.
Okay.
All right. So thanks, Joe. I thought that was very helpful and very insightful.
Okay, good.
Let me share my screen here. So if you have any follow-up questions for Joe, feel free to reach out to him. His email's there. Or you can reach out to Sherry or myself if you have any logistics questions. This recording will be posted to kyap2020.com by the end of the day. And if you want solution handouts, feel free to email any of the three of us and we can get those to you as well. Next week, we're going to be joined by Rob Schultz, who has been doing the College Board's YouTube live videos. So we're very excited to have him as well to share some AP exam preparation based on how he best sees the topics on the test being presented. So please feel free to spread the word, tune into that. With it being pretty close to the actual AP exam date, I feel like there might be some more engagement there for people that would be interested. So please spread that word. Any teacher and student is welcome. We're very happy to have Rob. So, but again, thanks to Joe. You've done an excellent job for the past 2 weeks, so we appreciate you taking your time to share your knowledge with us as well.
Yep, glad to do it. Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, and if you or Sherry have any other comments, make them now. If not, we will go ahead and sign off and hope to see you all next week.
Just a quick reminder about mock exams, and I put a note in the chat box if any teacher's interested. or has questions about those.
All right. We will see you all later. Thank you very much.